You wake before dawn. The air feels charged, though nothing in the room has moved. The same clock, the same light, the same silence. Yet something invisible has shifted. People speak to you as if subtly rewritten, their reactions half a beat out of sync. You can't explain it, but reality feels thinner, almost transparent, as if a new version of the world were sliding quietly into place beneath the old one. This is where the transition begins, not in explosions of light, but in small distortions that whisper, something is changing. You're closer than you realize to crossing into a new frequency of existence, one that's already forming beneath your perception. And the question that won't leave you is this: what if you're not waiting for your new reality to appear, but remembering it? It never begins with fireworks. It begins with silence, a kind of emptiness that seems at first completely meaningless. You wake up one morning and the world feels slightly off. The coffee tastes the same, the light through the window falls the same way, but something invisible has changed its position. It's as if a frequency you were once tuned to has gone out of range. You can't name what's different, only that it is. This subtle dissonance is not a malfunction. It is the prelude to transformation. Before every genuine shift in consciousness, there's a quiet unraveling. The nervous system recalibrating, old mental habits losing grip, external routines dissolving without warning. It feels like confusion because your awareness is temporarily suspended between two realities, the one that's fading and the one still forming. Imagine a radio changing stations. Between frequencies, you hear static. Most people panic at the static. They assume something's wrong with the radio. But that noise is the signal of transition. Consciousness behaves the same way. When you feel lost, uncertain, strangely detached from what used to make sense, you're hearing the static between stations. For a few days or weeks, your familiar mental architecture begins to wobble. You forget simple things, crave solitude, notice small coincidences that feel oddly significant. Your old goals no longer motivate you, yet new ones haven't emerged. You might call it burnout or emotional fatigue. In reality, it's the early stage of synaptic reorganization, the brain and heart preparing to process reality through a more coherent lens. If you could measure it, you'd see micro shifts in your body, subtle changes in breathing rhythm, heart rate variability, even temperature regulation. The physiology follows consciousness. Your body always knows before your mind does. It starts adjusting to a new frequency before you've decided to change anything. That's why the first signal of an inner shift often feels like an inexplicable fatigue or a sudden need to pause. Most people misinterpret this pause as regression. They rush to fill the silence, to repair what doesn't need fixing. But if you can resist the impulse to fix, you begin to perceive the deeper pattern. Every collapse in routine is actually an opening, a vacuum that pulls in the new alignment. The emptiness is not absence. It's the energetic gap through which new data, new perception, new coherence can enter. Think of an artist who erases a sketch before starting again. To an observer, it looks like destruction. To the artist, it's preparation. The blank canvas is not nothing. It's pure potential. Likewise, the still moments of your life when everything feels suspended are not signs of loss, but signs of readiness. There's a physics to this process. In complex systems, order often emerges only after a brief phase of chaos. When temperature, pressure, or information density crosses a threshold, the old structure collapses, not as failure, but as reconfiguration. Your consciousness operates the same way. The invisible signal before every personal shift is this temporary incoherence, the system reorganizing itself into higher order. Here is a small exercise. Tonight, instead of labeling your confusion as problem, observe it as data. Feel where in your body the uncertainty lives: chest, stomach, throat. Notice its texture. Is it heavy, restless, warm, vibrating? Don't analyze, just witness. Then ask quietly, what if this is not confusion, but calibration? By naming the sensation as calibration, you stop resisting it. And the moment resistance softens, perception widens. Subtle signs begin to appear. A repeated number, an unexpected encounter, a sudden clarity about something you hadn't thought of in years. These are not random. They are coherence waves beginning to align your outer and inner fields, so when life starts feeling strange, when time bends, when you lose interest in things that once defined you, when conversations feel slightly out of sync, remember this is the whisper before the new music begins, the silence that precedes symphony. The real question is not why this is happening, but what you are observing within it. Because what you choose to observe next will determine whether you step forward into the new frequency or loop back into the old one. And that is where the next revelation begins, the subtle mistake that keeps most people repeating the same reality again and again. Most people think observation means looking at what happens. Something breaks, something ends, something begins, and we stare at the event, analyzing its shape, memorizing its edges. But this is the trap. What you call reality is never just the event. It's the field of consciousness that generated it. By focusing only on what occurred, you freeze the pattern that created it, and unknowingly press play again. It's like watching waves crash on the shore while ignoring the tide beneath them. You react to the splash, but you never trace the current. The next wave, identical in rhythm and force, returns as if on command. That's how repetition works, not as punishment, but as unconscious fidelity. The mind, unexamined, keeps choosing the same frequency. Imagine someone who keeps meeting the same kind of person in different forms, new names, new faces, same lesson. They think life is mocking them, but life is simply mirroring the unobserved emotion they still carry. Observation without awareness is reflection without depth. You see the mirror, but not the light that makes the image visible. Here lies the quiet error. You watch outcomes, not origins. You observe behavior, not the state that preceded it. You measure what happened, not the quality of attention that made it possible. And because consciousness responds to its own observation, what you notice most often becomes what reappears. Every reaction is a rehearsal. There's a moment, small and easily missed, when a familiar situation begins to replay. An argument forming, a disappointment rising, a chance slipping away. In that instant, most people rush to control the situation, to defend, to justify, to fix. But if you could pause right there, even for 3 breaths, you'd notice something strange. The emotional déjà vu, the faint echo of having been here before. That's the signal that reality is looping. The loop survives because it feeds on unexamined focus. The mind says, "This again," and dives into resistance, which is itself another form of attention. The more you resist, the more energy you give to the pattern. Consciousness doesn't interpret your dislike. It only registers what you amplify through focus. Whether you crave or despise it, you're still feeding it. Science describes something similar in neuroplasticity. The more often a neural pathway fires, the stronger it becomes. Thoughts that repeat literally carve grooves in the brain, making it easier for the same emotional sequence to play again. That's why transformation is less about changing your thoughts and more about changing where you look from. When you shift the vantage point, the pattern loses fuel. Try this. The next time you catch yourself in a recurring scene, same emotion, same tone, same outcome, don't rush to interpret. Instead, ask quietly, from where am I observing this? Not why it's happening, but who is watching. You'll notice that when observation turns inward, the emotional charge begins to dissolve. You've stopped feeding the old program by refusing to play your usual role within it. This is the difference between observing life as data and observing life as mirror. In the first, you count events and categorize meaning. In the second, you sense the subtle vibration beneath them, how your attention shapes what you call real. It's less about analysis and more about presence, perceiving without reacting, noticing without naming. There's a simple experiment that makes this visible. Sit quietly for 1 minute and recall a memory that still feels unresolved. Instead of revisiting what happened, shift focus to how your body responds now, in real time. Maybe your jaw tightens or your shoulders lift. That physical echo is the program, your body's way of replaying the old frequency. If you simply stay present with that sensation, without needing to fix it, something remarkable occurs. The loop loses definition. You've observed the observer, and the pattern no longer finds an anchor. Reality doesn't repeat to torture you. It repeats to reveal what you continue to look away from. Every cycle is an invitation to see more clearly, not to succeed or fail. The moment you stop labeling experiences as good or bad and start perceiving them as information about your current state of consciousness, repetition becomes evolution. But this evolution brings its own kind of friction. The old self doesn't fade without noise. When new perception starts to emerge, the previous version of you begins to disassemble. Beliefs, habits, even relationships that matched your former frequency start to shake loose. It can feel like loss or collapse, but it's actually the next phase unfolding. The meeting point between the version of you that is dying and the one that is quietly forming. And that collision, the shock between the old and the new you, is where the real transformation begins. There is a moment when the old version of you collides with the new one trying to emerge. It doesn't announce itself gently. It shows up as confusion, fatigue, bursts of clarity followed by doubt. You start to feel divided. Part of you wants to hold on to what's familiar, while another part knows it no longer fits. The tension between those two forces creates an internal shock, like tectonic plates shifting beneath the surface of awareness. This shock is not a malfunction. It's a sign of reconfiguration. Consciousness can't expand without breaking its previous container. What you called you was not a fixed identity. It was a set of consistent reactions, habits of perception held together by memory. When a new frequency of awareness begins to stabilize, those old configurations start to lose coherence. Relationships may feel misaligned. Priorities change. Even your body reacts differently. Sleep patterns shift. Tastes alter, emotions fluctuate in unpredictable rhythms. You might feel like you're falling apart, but you're actually falling open. The structure that used to protect you can no longer sustain the weight of new awareness. Every belief, every story that once defined your sense of control begins to tremble. The mind calls it crisis, but in truth it's a release, the shedding of accumulated tension between the outdated and the emerging. Think of metal being tempered by fire. At first, heat weakens it. Molecules scatter, form disarray. But under that apparent chaos, a new alignment takes shape. Stronger, more flexible, more resilient. Your consciousness undergoes a similar process. The discomfort is the fire. The reorganization beneath it is the strengthening. There's a reason transformation feels violent on the inside. The nervous system is wired to preserve familiarity. It interprets change as threat, even when the change is evolution. The old neural circuits that once defined safety start losing dominance, and the brain resists by replaying fear patterns, anxiety, nostalgia, self-doubt. You're not regressing. You're detoxing from the gravitational pull of who you used to be. The key is to stop reading the turbulence as failure. The body trembles not because you're weak, but because your inner architecture is being rewired. When you feel the emotional storm rising, the tight chest, the sudden heaviness, the impulse to retreat, try something different. Instead of trying to suppress it, bring attention to the raw physical sensation, not the story, not the thought, just the pulse of energy moving through. That's consciousness in transit. Most people interrupt the process too early. They interpret the pressure as a sign to return to what's comfortable. But if you can stay with the discomfort without naming it, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Beneath the chaos, there's an undercurrent of order forming. Patterns of perception reorganize themselves toward coherence. You start seeing through the noise, not with logic, but with direct knowing. In this phase, synchronicities often intensify. The outer world mirrors the internal turbulence, random events, uncanny timing, chance encounters that feel loaded with meaning. These aren't accidents, they're feedback loops, external expressions of the friction between realities. As the old field dissolves, your awareness starts intersecting with signals from the new one. It's as if the universe is testing your stability within this emerging frequency, asking silently, can you stay centered while everything familiar rearranges? This is why many spiritual traditions emphasize stillness not as withdrawal, but as alignment. When the old self collapses, silence becomes your stabilizer. In that pause, you begin to sense the subtle rhythm beneath all apparent disorder, a coherence that was always there, waiting for the noise to subside. If you listen carefully during those moments of shock, you can almost hear the sound of realities overlapping, the hum of old beliefs fading as new ones come online. The friction between them produces heat, and that heat is the energy of birth. You are being remade not through addition, but through release. Every time you surrender an outdated identity, you make space for a truer resonance to enter. You can test this experientially. The next time you feel torn between two impulses, the one that clings and the one that calls, pause. Don't choose immediately. Just observe the space between them. That space is the meeting point of two realities. The longer you can remain there without forcing a resolution, the more the old pattern loses gravity. You begin to sense which direction carries vitality rather than fear. There is no shortcut through the shock. It's the threshold every conscious being must pass. And yet, inside that tension, something miraculous is happening. Your perception is being tuned to detect a finer order of meaning. The noise, once overwhelming, begins to reveal its structure. What looked like conflict becomes dialogue between realities, each one teaching you how to stabilize the next level of coherence. Soon those subtle alignments, the coincidences, the patterns, the strange timing of events will start to make sense. They aren't random. They're the first visible evidence that the transition is real. What you once dismissed as coincidence begins to show itself as communication, the language of the field responding to your new state of awareness. It starts subtly. You glance at the clock, 11:11. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in months, and your phone lights up with their name. You hum an old song, and it plays in the next store you enter. At first, you brush it off as coincidence. But somewhere beneath logic, something stirs. It feels intentional, as if reality itself is winking back at you. Synchronicities appear when your internal state begins to align with a new field of coherence. They are not supernatural interruptions. They are feedback, reality showing you that your observation and the fabric of the world have begun to communicate. The moment you notice one, you've already stepped into a subtler layer of perception where meaning and pattern converge. In physics, resonance occurs when one vibration naturally amplifies another that shares its frequency. Consciousness behaves the same way. When your inner attention steadies, when thoughts, emotions, and physical energy begin to harmonize, you become resonant with certain probabilities. Reality starts to echo your frequency through events that seem too precise to be chance. Most people miss this because they look for synchronicities as signs of reward or validation. But their true function is diagnostic, not decorative. They reveal the degree of coherence between your inner and outer worlds. When your energy is scattered, patterns blur. When your observation sharpens, the world arranges itself around that precision. Synchronicity is the mirror of conscious alignment. Consider how perception filters data. Your brain processes millions of bits of information every second, yet you consciously register only a fraction. What determines what you see isn't the data itself. It's the filter of attention. When you shift your focus, you reorganize the field of what becomes visible. Synchronicities occur when those filters momentarily align with larger patterns that were always present but previously unnoticed. You can experience this directly. Think of something neutral, a symbol, a word, a color, and gently hold it in awareness throughout your day. Don't obsess over it. Just keep a relaxed curiosity. Within hours, you'll start seeing it appear in unexpected places. That's not magic. It's coherence at work. You've tuned your perceptual antenna to a specific frequency, and reality responds by surfacing corresponding signals. Now imagine this process operating not at the level of a symbol, but at the level of identity. When your sense of self evolves, when your beliefs, emotions, and perception synchronize around a higher state of awareness, your entire environment begins to reorganize around that vibration. People, opportunities, and even obstacles appear with mathematical precision to refine the frequency you're embodying. What seems like coincidence is actually correspondence, the outer echo of an inner equation. Jung called this meaningful coincidence, but he also hinted that it wasn't caused by thought alone. It emerges from what he called the psychoid field, the dimension where psyche and matter overlap. Modern physics, through the study of quantum entanglement and coherence, mirrors this principle. Separate systems can synchronize without direct contact once they share an underlying connection. Consciousness is that connection. Synchronicity is its signature. To live attentively within this dynamic is to become a participant rather than a spectator of existence. When you start noticing the pattern, not greedily but with quiet curiosity, something changes in your nervous system. You move from reactivity to receptivity. The world stops being random and begins to feel conversational. Every repeated number, every unexpected encounter becomes part of a dialogue between your awareness and the intelligence that shapes form. This doesn't mean forcing meaning into everything you see. True synchronicity feels calm, not dramatic. It's accompanied by a subtle recognition, a small inner click that says, yes, this belongs here. The mind may not understand the logic, but the body feels the alignment. You can measure it in microsignals, a breath that deepens, a sudden stillness, a sense of time pausing for a moment. These physiological markers are your proof that coherence has been reached, however briefly. When such events multiply, they serve as markers that your old timeline, the one governed by repetition and reaction, is dissolving. The field is adjusting around a new center of gravity, your expanded observation. Yet this phase can also be destabilizing. The more you align, the more the old frequencies attempt to reassert themselves, as if testing your stability within the new order. This is where many lose faith. They see the synchronicities fade and assume the magic is gone. But the truth is more intricate. When the signal quiets, it's not absence, it's integration. The new frequency is becoming natural enough not to need confirmation. The external signs withdraw because your perception itself has become the sign. Still, that withdrawal can feel like loss, like the silence after an orchestra stops playing. But silence, too, has purpose. It's the next threshold, the pause where reality waits to see if you can hold coherence without visible proof. Because after the dialogue of synchronicities comes something deeper, the test of presence itself, when reality no longer sends signals but mirrors your stability in pure stillness. You don't create reality through wishful thinking. You create it through observation, but not the kind of observation you were taught in school. Most people observe as spectators. They look at life, analyze outcomes, label them good or bad, and move on. Conscious observation works differently. It's not about watching from a distance. It's about becoming the space through which experience appears. Every moment you look at something, a thought, a sensation, a circumstance, you're not just perceiving it, you're influencing how it stabilizes in your field. The act of observation collapses possibility into form. This is not mystical poetry. It's measurable in the behavior of systems, both physical and psychological. In quantum experiments, the presence of an observer changes the behavior of particles. In the same way, your awareness determines how energy organizes itself in your lived experience. But here is what most people miss. Observation only shapes reality when it is present, not reactive. Fear, judgment, and anticipation distort the signal. They introduce noise into the field, scattering coherence. When you observe through fear, you don't create, you reinforce fragmentation. The mind projects its biases and calls the reflection truth. To understand this mechanism, imagine shining a flashlight through fog. If your hand trembles, the beam scatters. The fog seems thicker than it is. But when your hand steadies, the light cuts cleanly through, revealing what was always there. Conscious observation steadies that light. Presence is the still hand. The more stable your attention, the more reality reveals its structure instead of your projection. You can test this immediately. Choose a recurring situation that frustrates you, something small but persistent, like a delayed response from someone, a feeling of being unseen, or an obstacle that keeps reappearing. Instead of reacting, bring full attention to it. Notice your first impulse, tension, blame, self-defense, then breathe once, slowly, and observe the entire experience without commentary. Feel the sensations in your body, the thoughts rising and falling, the subtle movement of resistance. Don't try to fix it. Just watch. After a few seconds, something shifts. The energy that felt solid begins to move. Emotions lose weight, and clarity seeps through. You haven't solved the problem, you've changed the field in which the problem exists. This is the mechanism in real time. Observation, stripped of reaction, reorganizes the data of experience. What was once static begins to flow. Neuroscience calls this the meta-awareness effect. When you become aware of being aware, your brain's prefrontal regions activate, quieting the limbic system, the center of emotional reactivity. This physiological change widens your perception window, allowing for new responses that weren't available in a reactive state. Conscious observation, therefore, is not a philosophical idea. It's a biological reset, an act that alters the neural signature of how you meet the world. But the mind resists this simplicity. It prefers to do something and to analyze, plan, correct. Observation without control feels like surrender, and in a sense it is. Yet it's the kind of surrender that restores power, not loses it. When you stop fighting appearances, you start seeing origins. You begin to detect the subtle architecture behind events, how emotion precedes thought, how thought precedes behavior, how attention threads them all together. At this level, creation becomes tuning rather than force. You realize you don't have to push life into shape. You only have to observe clearly enough for it to self-organize. Reality doesn't respond to command. It responds to coherence. The steadier your awareness, the more the external aligns with it. Conscious observation is, in essence, alignment made visible. The practical question then becomes, how do you stay present when the old frequency, the fearful observer, keeps trying to reclaim control? The answer lies in micro-recognition. Every time you notice yourself slipping into judgment, pause. Feel the contraction in your body. That moment of awareness is the mechanism resetting itself. You've interrupted the loop and allowed the field to restabilize. Eventually, observation becomes less about looking and more about listening. You start to sense subtle feedback, small shifts in tone, timing, atmosphere, that tell you whether your awareness is coherent or fragmented. When you're coherent, reality feels soft, spacious, responsive. When you're fragmented, time feels compressed, things resist movement, and interactions become mechanical. As your attention refines, synchronicities stop being external surprises and start functioning as internal diagnostics. They reflect how accurately you're observing. Presence stops being a practice and becomes a constant dialogue. Your consciousness communicating with the fabric of life. Yet every evolution invites a test. As soon as you begin to stabilize this awareness, reality seems to push back. Old situations resurface, familiar fears reappear, people around you mirror your previous frequency. It's not regression, it's calibration. The field is checking whether your observation remains clear when challenged. And that's the next threshold. Understanding that when reality tests you, it's not the world against you. It's coherence asking if you can hold your signal steady under pressure. When your awareness begins to stabilize, the field around you responds, not with applause but with pressure. It's a quiet test disguised as daily life, the conversation that triggers your old defensiveness, the delay that tempts your impatience, the opportunity that looks exactly like what you've outgrown. You think you're regressing, but you're not. Reality is simply verifying your new frequency, checking whether coherence holds when the conditions shift. Every system, physical or conscious, tests stability through stress. Bridges are built, then shaken. Materials are heated, then cooled. The structure must prove its integrity under contrast. Consciousness follows the same law. When your perception expands, it must pass through friction to prove it can sustain the new bandwidth. You're not being punished, you're being tuned. The closer you move toward a new timeline, the more the old one tries to reclaim you. It's a gravitational pull, subtle yet relentless. Old habits call your name. Old narratives reassert their authority. Familiar emotions resurface like ghosts wanting one last acknowledgement. They appear not to haunt you but to ask, "Are you sure you're done with us?" Most people interpret these returns as failure. They believe that if doubt reappears, progress is lost. But in truth, the recurrence of old patterns is confirmation that you're near the threshold. The system is releasing stored charge. You are not relapsing. You're being invited to observe from a higher altitude, to meet the same stimulus without the same reaction. This is the real test of conscious observation. Can you stay centered when your environment stops cooperating with your expectations? It's easy to be aware in stillness, but awareness proves itself in motion, in the noise of traffic, the argument with someone you love, the disappointment that visits unannounced. Each moment offers the same question in a different costume. Will you respond from the new frequency or the old reflex? There's a biological mirror to this process. When muscles strengthen, they first tremble under resistance. When neural pathways change, the old ones fire automatically, seeking dominance. Your nervous system must learn through repetition that the new pattern is safe. Each test of reality is a neural rehearsal, your brain updating its definition of stability. That's why what feels like chaos is often a sign of integration. You might notice that during these tests, your external world accelerates. Time feels compressed, decisions seem urgent. The mind wants to resolve the discomfort by reaching for old certainty. But if you can delay reaction, even for a few breaths, something subtle happens. The rush dissolves into space, and clarity emerges. Reality was never demanding a specific action. It was measuring the steadiness of your perception. Here's an experiment you can try. When a familiar challenge arises, instead of resisting or rushing to fix it, quietly say to yourself, "This is the field verifying alignment." Feel how that phrase changes your physiology. Shoulders relax, breath deepens, thought speed decreases. You're reminding your system that nothing is wrong. You're simply in calibration. From that state, actions arise naturally, without the noise of fear or control. In this space, something remarkable begins to occur. The same events that used to provoke anxiety now feel like cues in a larger symphony. You start to recognize patterns in timing, the way certain obstacles appear right before a leap, the way silence follows an expansion, the way loss clears space for precision. Life stops feeling adversarial and starts feeling intelligent. It's not that challenges disappear, they change texture. They stop carrying the energy of punishment and start revealing the rhythm of refinement. You sense that each difficulty carries within it a precise frequency meant to polish awareness. What once felt like opposition becomes collaboration. The world is no longer testing if you deserve peace, it's teaching you how to hold it. Still, the rhythm of these tests includes pauses. After a period of intensity, life often falls into quiet. Conversations slow, opportunities seem to recede, signals fade. This stillness can feel like absence, but it's actually the next phase of integration. The field retreats so you can consolidate the new frequency internally. What feels like emptiness is the nervous system reconfiguring around coherence, and that silence, the deep, clean pause after the test, is not emptiness at all. It's the threshold to something subtler, something most people overlook because they're busy trying to fill it. That still point is where the next stage begins, the realization that silence itself is not the end of the dialogue with reality, but the portal through which the new one starts to take form. There comes a moment when the movement stops. After the noise of transformation, after the tests, after the friction between timelines, there's a hush. It's not the silence of absence, it's the silence of arrival. Everything that once felt urgent begins to slow. The mind reaches for something to fix, but there's nothing left to fix. You can feel that reality is holding its breath with you. At first, this quiet can be unsettling. You've been trained to equate stillness with stagnation. When nothing seems to move, you assume you've lost momentum. But silence isn't the end of change. It's the space that allows change to solidify. The universe doesn't expand in noise. It expands in rhythm, alternating between movement and pause. That pause is the portal, the place where the next frequency enters. Think of how a musician uses rest notes. Without them, melody becomes chaos. The pause is what gives meaning to the sound. Consciousness follows the same pattern. After expansion, there must be stillness, a moment for integration, for the nervous system to register what's been learned, for awareness to catch up with its new reach. If you rush past this phase, you return to noise, mistaking activity for evolution. Silence has texture. It's not a void, it's a field of potential. When you allow yourself to rest in it without labeling it boredom or emptiness, something begins to emerge, not as thought, but as resonance. Ideas that felt far away begin to surface effortlessly. Emotions that were tangled start to dissolve. It's as if reality itself begins to whisper again, but this time it's using your own awareness as its language. You can sense this physiologically. In deep silence, the body's rhythms synchronize. Heart rate slows, breath evens out. The prefrontal cortex lights up with coherence. Studies on meditation and flow states show the same signature. Brain waves shift from beta's chatter to alpha's harmony. In that space, perception widens. You start noticing details that were invisible before, subtle lights, faint intuitions, quiet certainties that feel more solid than logic. Silence, then, is not an escape from reality. It's a recalibration of it. It allows you to perceive the architecture behind events, how everything connects in patterns too delicate for words. When you stop demanding that reality speak louder, you realize it's been speaking all along, just below the threshold of noise. But entering this silence requires trust. The mind will protest. It will try to fill the gap with plans, interpretations, or nostalgia. It fears the stillness because it cannot control it. Yet if you stay, even for a minute longer than comfort allows, the quality of perception changes. You begin to feel life moving through you, rather than you moving through life. Awareness stops chasing experience and becomes the still center around which experience turns. Here's something you can try the next time the world feels paused. Instead of reaching for stimulation, let the pause widen. Don't fill it with sound, screen, or thought. Simply notice the quiet, not as background, but as the main event. Feel its density. Listen until the silence itself starts to sound like a tone, faint, living, humming. That vibration is not imagined. It's the electromagnetic hum of coherence inside and around you. Within that hum, understanding arrives wordlessly. You start realizing that you were never waiting for life to catch up. Life was waiting for you to stop running. Silence opens the bridge between thought and awareness, between effort and presence. It's the portal through which information from higher layers of consciousness filters into form. Every genuine insight, every moment of clarity you've ever had, was born in that gap, in the quiet between thoughts. If you watch closely, you'll notice a pattern. Every time you surrender to stillness, something reorganizes itself without your intervention. Conversations shift tone, relationships soften, opportunities appear where you hadn't been looking. Silence rearranges the field because it removes distortion. It's like resetting an instrument to its natural frequency after years of detuning. And then, something even subtler happens. As silence deepens, you begin to sense that the line between you and reality blurs. The observer and the observed merge. You realize that you were never generating the new reality from effort. You were tuning into it through presence. The act of stillness reveals that creation was never an act of making, but of aligning. What you once thought of as manifestation starts to feel more like recognition, a remembering of what was already here. Silence becomes the tuning fork that brings hidden harmonies into audibility. It's through that resonance that the next understanding begins to unfold. The revelation that you were never truly creating anything new at all, but rather tuning into realities that have always been waiting in the quiet, just beyond sound. For most of your life, you've been told that you are the creator of your reality, that through focus, visualization, and effort, you make the world bend to your will. It sounds empowering, and for a time, it works. You visualize, act, push, and sometimes things align, but sooner or later the illusion cracks. Some events remain stubbornly outside your control, others manifest but arrive hollow, drained of the meaning you expected. And then the deeper truth begins to whisper. Maybe you're not creating reality at all. Maybe you're tuning into it. Every possible version of reality already exists, not as separate worlds, but as overlapping frequencies in the same field. Consciousness doesn't fabricate these frequencies. It selects among them through resonance. You experience the one that matches the vibration of your current awareness. That's why when you shift emotionally, perceptually, even slightly, the entire world seems to reconfigure itself around you. Nothing outside you changed, only the station you were tuned to. Think of a radio receiver. It doesn't produce the music it plays. The songs were always there, moving invisibly through the air. The receiver simply adjusts its frequency to match the one already broadcasting. If the tuning is off, the signal distorts. When the dial locks in perfectly, clarity emerges. Consciousness works exactly the same way. You don't create the song of your life, you align with it. This is what the silence was preparing you for. In stillness, you stopped generating noise, and in that quiet, you began to perceive the underlying frequencies already humming beneath existence. The act of observation, steady, coherent, undistorted, was the dial turning. And when you reached that point of alignment, reality didn't need to be made. It simply revealed the version that matched your new signal. That's why forcing change rarely works. Effort belongs to the dimension of distortion. The more you push against what is, the more you amplify the static. You might achieve temporary rearrangements, but they collapse quickly because the frequency underneath, your true state of being, remains unchanged. Only resonance sustains transformation. When your inner frequency matches what you seek, it arrives naturally, without negotiation. There's an elegance to this model that removes the moral weight from experience. You're not being rewarded for positive thinking or punished for negative thoughts. You're simply interacting with an intelligent field that mirrors your level of coherence. It's not personal, it's physics of consciousness. When the receiver vibrates clearly, it draws in the bandwidth that matches. When it's cluttered with interference, fear, resistance, control, the broadcast distorts and life feels fragmented. To feel this directly, you can try something simple. Recall a moment when you felt absolute ease, maybe walking alone at night, watching water move, or hearing music that quieted you completely. In that instant, notice how everything seemed to respond to you effortlessly. People smiled, timing flowed, intuition guided your next move without analysis. You weren't creating, you were in tune. The field was cooperating because there was no separation between you and it. You had become the broadcast. This tuning process also explains why the same external situation can feel entirely different on different days. When you're centered, even difficulty feels purposeful, alive with hidden symmetry. When you're fragmented, the same scene feels hostile or meaningless. The outer circumstances didn't change, the station did. And as your observation grows steadier, you begin to realize that life's signals, coincidences, delays, disruptions, are not random events to manipulate, but instruments adjusting your frequency back into coherence. The most paradoxical part of this shift is that as you stop trying to create, manifestation accelerates. Effort dissolves into participation. You act, but not to force. You act to express the resonance you're already living. The field responds instantly, because it recognizes its own tone in you. What once felt like cause and effect becomes synchronization, an elegant dance between attention and existence. But this awareness brings responsibility of a subtler kind. Once you understand that tuning determines experience, you can no longer pretend to be a victim of circumstance. You realize that every emotional state is a frequency selection, every thought a micro-adjustment of the dial. And as you refine it, the boundaries between inner and outer reality fade. You start noticing moments where feeling and event overlap perfectly. An idea appears, and within hours, the world mirrors it back. Eventually, this tuning becomes so fluid that the concept of manifestation itself dissolves. There is no longer a separate you making things happen. There's only awareness vibrating at a frequency that continuously unfolds as experience. Creation, in its purest sense, is revelation, the uncovering of what was always present, waiting for recognition. And when that realization settles, something unexpected follows. The field that once felt external begins to feel intimate. You see patterns converging, signs, encounters, decisions, all weaving together into a harmony that no longer needs explanation. It's the moment when observation, feeling, and belief converge so precisely that reality responds in unison. That convergence is not the end of the process, but the beginning of stability. The stage where all the scattered fragments of your experience start merging into one coherent, living frequency. There comes a point when the scattered pieces of your inner and outer world begin to move toward each other. It's subtle at first, a rhythm, a sense that the world is breathing with you instead of against you. Thoughts, emotions, and circumstances that once seemed disconnected start forming a single thread. This is the moment of convergence, when the field of consciousness and the field of reality align so precisely that separation dissolves. It doesn't arrive with spectacle. It unfolds quietly, like the soft closing of a door behind you. You realize that things you once chased are now arriving without pursuit. The right person calls at the right time. An opportunity appears out of sequence but fits perfectly, and situations that used to exhaust you now resolve with minimal effort. The convergence isn't luck, it's coherence made visible. Your internal frequency has synchronized with a version of reality that matches it. Imagine ripples forming on a pond. When they move randomly, they interfere with one another, creating turbulence. But when the ripples align in phase, they merge into a single amplified wave. Convergence is that moment of alignment, the interference collapsing into harmony. Each part of your life, once oscillating at its own rhythm, starts to move as one. The result is not intensity, but clarity. Everything feels lighter because nothing is competing for energy. This alignment is measurable in your experience. The mind grows quieter not because you suppress thought, but because thought itself becomes transparent. It's no longer trying to control outcomes. It's reflecting a larger order already unfolding. The body mirrors this shift. Breath deepens, tension releases, small coincidences echo the rhythm of your mood. Even time feels different, not as a line to follow, but as a pattern to inhabit. You begin to sense events approaching before they happen, not as prediction, but as resonance. Psychologists call this flow, but its roots go deeper than performance or focus. Flow is the psychological signature of spiritual coherence, the nervous system finally entraining to the wider intelligence that sustains it. In this state, the brain's hemispheres synchronize. The heart's electromagnetic field expands and information travels through the body with minimal resistance. It's as if the inner orchestra, after endless rehearsals, has finally found the key that matches the symphony of the world. And yet, convergence doesn't feel like euphoria. It feels like recognition, as if something ancient and precise is clicking back into place. You look at the smallest details of your life and feel an unexplainable gratitude, not because they are perfect, but because they make sense. Every mistake, every detour, every loss now reads as a necessary chord in the composition. You see that nothing was random. Each experience was part of the tuning process that allowed this frequency to emerge. In this phase, decisions stop being calculated. They arise naturally, like the next note in a melody you already know by heart. You don't need to control outcomes. You sense which direction carries resonance. This doesn't make life effortless, but it does make it frictionless. Challenges still occur, but they move in rhythm with you. The same event that once felt like conflict now appears as conversation, feedback from a universe that speaks your language. The most remarkable sign of convergence is how perception shifts from duality to inclusion. You stop labeling experiences as good or bad, success or failure, progress or setback. Everything belongs because everything vibrates from the same source. The observer and the observed have merged. What you witness is what you are. When that realization dawns, even the ordinary becomes luminous. The sound of rain, a conversation, the movement of light across a wall, each holds the same intelligence that shaped galaxies, but the convergence is not static. It's alive, pulsing. It continues to adjust as you expand. The moment you relax into it fully, you begin to feel the next pulse forming, the awareness that what you once called change isn't coming later. It's happening now continuously within this living field of consciousness. The portal you were waiting to step through has already opened, not in front of you, but inside your perception. And this realization that convergence is not a destination, but a living state, leads naturally to what comes next. The recognition that the so-called shift is no longer a future event. It's already unfolding in this very moment, within the space of awareness itself, rewriting what you once thought of as the boundaries of your reality. You keep waiting for a signal, a visible sign that the shift has arrived, a clear boundary between the life you've known and the one you've been sensing. But there is no grand unveiling, no doorway swinging wide with fanfare. The portal doesn't appear before you. It unfolds within you moment by moment. Each time perception expands just enough to notice that what you once called future is already here. The truth is almost disappointingly simple. The new reality doesn't begin somewhere else. It begins in the exact same room you're in right now, among the same people, inside the same routine, only filtered through a new state of awareness. The outer scenery remains constant, but the geometry of meaning shifts. What you used to interpret as coincidence becomes communication. What felt random now feels choreographed. The portal is not a location, it's a change in how light moves through consciousness. When awareness expands, the old and the new coexist for a while. One moment you're immersed in the noise of habit, the next you feel the clarity of alignment. You may even sense both realities overlaying each other, the same conversation, but with different tones, the same decision, but with two possible outcomes visible at once. It can feel like standing between radio frequencies, both broadcasting simultaneously. The static you hear is not confusion, it's the friction of timelines merging. Physically, the body registers this threshold. There are days when time feels elastic, when you move through ordinary events with a strange sense of déjà vu, as if you've already lived this moment, or are living it again, differently. It's not imagination, it's the perceptual evidence that your consciousness is interacting with parallel versions of experience. The portal is not an exit from reality, but a deeper entrance into its multiplicity. In this state, the smallest actions begin to hold weight. A sentence spoken with awareness carries different resonance than the same sentence spoken mechanically. The energy of your attention infuses every gesture, and reality responds accordingly. You begin to see that crossing over doesn't require travel, only precision. The doorway is the exact point where observation becomes conscious, the instant you stop running on automatic and remember that you're participating in creation. From a scientific view, this isn't as mysterious as it sounds. Every second, your brain filters billions of sensory inputs down to a narrow bandwidth it can process. What you perceive as the world is already a tiny fraction of what exists around you. A small change in attention, a shift in expectation, emotion, or meaning reorganizes that filter, allowing previously invisible data to enter awareness. That expansion feels like stepping into a new reality because perceptually it is one. Once you grasp this, the nature of the portal changes. You realize it was never something to find, but something to stabilize. It's not a threshold to cross once, but a frequency to maintain. You cross it every time you stop reacting and start observing, every time you let silence anchor perception, every time you choose presence over projection. The portal stays open as long as your observation remains coherent. And coherence, as you've seen, isn't about perfection. It's about alignment, when your thought, emotion, and action harmonize around the same vibration. In that alignment, you stop fragmenting your energy across alternate timelines. Everything you are gathers into the present moment, and the present becomes multidimensional. The future you were waiting for is no longer ahead of you. It's nested inside the now, unfolding as you tune to it. This is why, during profound shifts, ordinary life feels both familiar and strangely transparent. You're still here, same body, same surroundings, but there's a subtle depth to everything. Reality has texture. Even silence carries meaning. The external world no longer feels separate from your inner state. It moves in synchronization with it, adjusting in real time as if responding to an unseen conductor. When you realize the portal is already open, urgency dissolves. You stop searching for evidence and start living as evidence. Your attention, once scattered across past and future, returns home. And from that center, you begin to sense that reality itself is watching you, mirroring your level of presence, echoing your frequency in every sound, every face, every coincidence that passes through your day. There's a strange peace in this recognition. You no longer need to force entry into the new world because you see that it was never locked. It was your own fragmentation that created the illusion of distance. The gatekeeper was distraction, the key was stillness. And now that both have dissolved, the distinction between worlds fades completely. The new reality is not coming, it's revealing. It's already here, woven into every breath, waiting for your perception to slow enough to meet it. The shift you've been anticipating is not an event on the horizon, it's the continuous unfolding of this very moment. And in that unfolding, you begin to sense something profound stirring, an awareness that you're closer than you ever imagined to the reality that has been calling you all along. Everything you've been sensing, the strange timing, the quiet shifts, the moments that feel both ordinary and sacred, are proof that your new reality isn't approaching. It's already here. You've moved from seeking to seeing, from effort to alignment. The world isn't something happening to you anymore. It's something happening with you. Every breath, every pause, every act of awareness is part of the same unfolding field. If you're feeling this resonance right now, it means you're standing inside the open portal, not waiting at its edge. Stay with it. Let this awareness become your new baseline and watch how reality continues to reorganize around your presence. To let me know you made it all the way to the end, write, "I'm tuned in" the comments. And if this message spoke to something deep in you, watch one of the videos appearing on your screen now. Each one expands this journey of consciousness in a new direction.